I'm going to show you the difference between American barbecue ribs and European style smoked ribs. And there's a lot of differences.
A big thanks to BourneX Smokers for sponsoring this video.
Of course, it all starts with meat. These are delicious pork ribs. And it doesn't matter if you're in America or in Europe, these pork ribs are the base of delicious cooked ribs. These are baby back ribs. In Europe, we should have called these pork ribs, not spare ribs. So if you're watching, you're from Europe, these are not spare ribs. These are pork ribs. These are baby back ribs if you're cooking American style ribs. And to do our comparison, we gotta have loads of ribs. So I got 4 beautiful racks. Now 2 of these racks I'm gonna use to show you how Americans cook their ribs. And the other 2 are going to be used to show you how the Europeans traditionally cook their ribs, because we are tending to forget about our traditions. Well, I'm gonna bring them back to you. First, I'm gonna show you how to cook the American style barbecue rib. Step 1 is to get rid of this. This is called the membrane, and it sits at the back of the ribs, and by taking them off, we're gonna make them extra tender in the end. Stick your finger underneath and then just tear it off. Now the ribs are all prepared, and all they need now is a little bit of flavor. And therefore I'll be using the PitmasterX Classic Barbecue Rub. Now the recipe is on our website, but it consists of 2 tablespoons of salt, 2 tablespoons of paprika powder, 2 tablespoons of onion powder, and ½ tablespoon of garlic powder. Then you're gonna mix it all up and sprinkle it onto your barbecue ribs. Now the amount that you apply depends on the thickness of the meat. And since we have a rather thick baby back rib, we want a little bit more of seasoning. And now look at the transformation. These look absolutely fantastic and delicious, and they are ready for the barbecue. I'm gonna do the same thing for my second rack of ribs, and the European style pork ribs are prepared completely different. First of all, you're not gonna need the American flavor profile. You want it, I know you want it, but come on, give the old-fashioned European style ribs a chance. Let me show you how to make them. First thing that you're gonna do is not take off the membranes. Just leave them on. Texture is more important in the European style ribs. We want that structure from the back of the ribs. We need it to be crunchy and crusty. We gotta leave it on. First thing that we're gonna put on is some salt. And I want you to use a finishing salt with a light structure. And that salt's gonna dry out the outside of the ribs. And then this is going to go on your ribs. This is a nutmeg. This is the traditional pork flavor that we know throughout of Europe. And all you need to do is just grate it on. And you don't want to use too much of this, just a light coat of it. Don't overpower the seasoning. You can see that the coat is very light. You almost can't see it on the pork ribs. But the amount of flavor that this holds is super powerful. So I'm guessing you're gonna need 2 teaspoons, 1 for the back and 1 for the front of the ribs. Unboxing sometimes might be a challenge, but look, these are cloves. And if you smell them, you think of Christmas. It's a warming feeling, and so is eating pork. When do you start raising pigs? You start early in the spring, and you raise them throughout the summer. And then when they become big, you slaughter them. And that happens in the winter time. And that's why we use these typical warming ingredients to flavorize the pork with. I got a pre-ground version of it. I'm gonna sprinkle it onto my ribs, just a little bit. And so that makes 2 teaspoons of cloves per ribs, 2 teaspoons of nutmeg per rib, and 2 teaspoons of salt per rib. Now we're gonna smoke our ribs. And for the American as well as the European ribs goes, is that they'll be smoked in a smoker. Traditionally, we'd smoke our ribs in a really big house, smokehouse, or a little shed. Make a little fire, but it's the same way they used to do it in America, until they started building brick fireplaces and then moved on to metal barbecues, like an offset smoker. And in Europe, we moved on to this. This is a BourneX smoker. It looks like a fridge, but it's actually a really good smoker that you can use to smoke meats to perfection. Let's fire it up. Both are start up in the same way. You just hit the switch, you set the temperature, and we're smoking at a temperature of 120 degrees Celsius. Because a low and slow smoking will give us more juicy ribs. And that's super important. on both sides of the pond. The next thing that you need to look out for is this. This is the hopper and it holds wood chips. For the American baby back ribs, I'll be using pecan and post oak to get that typical American flavor. And for the European style, I'm going to be using beechwood because this is the European preferred flavor profile. And the way these smokers work is that they have a heated element in the back. The hopper provides the wood chips where a hot spiral starts a small fire. So you're gonna have smoke and no flames. And to make sure of that, you're gonna put in a tray and put some water in this bucket so all of the embers die out immediately after they drop off. Once it's started up, I'm gonna put in my heat deflector and grease tray. And then I'm going to show you the way all American ribs are smoked. You're going to need a wire rack, place it in, and then place the ribs on top of that rack. Or just a regular pellet grill. This is the typical way Americans smoke their ribs. Ribs laying down on a rack with plenty room for air circulation. I'm going to close the door and we're going to be looking at the smokestack for a thin blue smoke. Time to show you how pork ribs are smoked in Europe. I'm going to put in my heat deflector, smoke tray, then this goes in, and now here it comes. I'm going to take my European style pork rib, I'm going to look for the second bone, I'm going to stick in a meat hook, just like that, and then I hang my ribs in the smoker. Both ribs are going in, almost like we would smoke fish. But all meats traditionally were hung in smokehouses like this. And if you thought that was the only difference between those ribs, now you're wrong. We got more to come. I'm going to make an American barbecue sauce for my American style baby back ribs. I'm going to start with a cup of ketchup, a quarter cup of good quality apple juice, a tablespoon of Worcester sauce, a half a tablespoon of ground black pepper, a tablespoon of PitmasterX's classic barbecue rub, a tablespoon of honey, 3 tablespoons of cane sugar. Bring that up to a slow simmer, give it a good stir, and your barbecue sauce is done. Once your American baby back ribs picked up enough smoke flavor, it's time to take them off. Drizzle on a little bit of that barbecue sauce and wrap them up in aluminum foil. This will prevent them from drying out on the barbecue. The American baby back ribs have been cooking for another 2 hours, and they should be done by now. Let's check them out, see how far along they are. And tenderness is an important part if you're cooking American barbecue ribs. Flavor, of course, and tenderness are the key features. So I want to see, whoa, I want to see, bro, look. It's super juicy, we got a beautiful smoke color on them. They're drizzling with juices, literally. These look freaking amazing and they're ready for the next step. A little bit more barbecue sauce, brushing it on, sticking it back in the barbecue to let the barbecue sauce dry up, get nice and sticky, and then the ribs are done. Whoa, look at these. What a beauties. Finally, they're done. They look absolutely freaking delicious. American baby back ribs, bro. Wow. Let's check out the European ribs. It's been about 4.5 hours in total, and my ribs should be done. Oh, smoked. Oh, look at that. What a beauty. Ribs are starting to poke out, meaning they're done. The meat is shrinking up. Completely different than what you would have seen with the American ribs, but they look freaking delicious. Let's get these off, let them rest for a while. And now the side-by-side comparison. American ribs versus European ribs. Yeah, and the comparison is not as much as like who's the best ribs or who's gonna win. That's not what this is about. This is about comparing, learning from each other, seeing where they're different, and maybe we can find a common goal together and make all the ribs worldwide better. So let's first take a look at these beautiful American ribs. Absolutely freaking delicious, and I just lift it up to see how soft and tender they are. And then they have that sticky outer coating, which is really fantastic. And I bet you these are awesome to eat. Now for the European ribs, we have a more brownish color. Not as much the red smoke color and the red from the paprika powder. It's more the natural color of the smoke. And again, the ribs look really juicy, really tender. They pop real nice. got clean bones, and they look freaking delicious. Now, without further ado, we can stare at these guys all day, or we could just slice into them and take a bite. I'll take a look first. Oh, these are nice and juicy. Those are some good looking ribs. They're super sticky. They look absolutely freaking fantastic. Let's give them a little squeeze. This is juiciness overload. Now let's slice into the Euro ribs. Look at that, nice and juicy as well. Pretty good looking ribs. Absolutely fantastic. Completely different color, but still looking freaking delicious. Now it's time for the taste test, but before we go there, I need to plate up my pork ribs. European pork ribs are always served with a side dish. And European style dishes are very simple. You're just gonna take some boiled potatoes, mash them with a little bit of milk, and of course some sauerkraut cooked in white wine. Then just place the ribs on top, and that's a delicious weekday workman's meal. Let's do the taste test and find out. I wanna start with the American because to me, it just looks that little bit more delicious than the European. Well, there we go. Oh. It falls off the bone, it's tender, the meat melts in your mouth, it's packed full with flavor. The baby back in the American style of barbecue is just so delicious. Now the Euro style version, completely different. Good bite, but the flavor profile is so much different. Even though it's still smoked, it's in the basic, it's almost the same thing as the American, but the spices that went onto these pork ribs are just so different than the Americans. It lacks that punch and flavor in the first bite, but then you get interested after the first bite. I can't make a choice between those, but if I need to point out one thing, in my experience, if you add loads of sugar to ribs, at first you think, wow, these flavors are great, and you're gonna eat loads of it. But then at a certain point, you kind of get filled up and you're completely satisfied. But with European ribs, of course you're gonna get filled up, but because there's no sugar, it takes a little while longer so you can eat a little bit more.